like to call the Gurnee Village Board regular meeting of February 25th, 2019 to order. Roll call, please, Andy.
Thorstensen.
Here.
Jacobs.
Here.
Ross.
Here.
Garner.
Here.
Bomas.
Present.
Hood.
Here.
6 present.
All right, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before I move on to our agenda, David Ziegler, one of our department heads, had an unfortunate a family emergency, so I would ask staff and the trustees to keep him and his family in your prayers tonight, please. First item is approval of the consent agenda as presented.
So
Do I have a
moved.
motion by trustee Jacobs,
Second.
second by trustee Garner. Roll call, please.
Thorstensen.
Yes.
Jacobs.
Aye.
Ross.
Aye.
Garner.
Aye.
Bomas.
Aye.
Hood.
Yes.
6 aye.
Motion carries. Patrick, please read the consent agenda into the record.
Item number 1, approval of the minutes from the February 4th, 2019 meeting. Item number 2, approval of resolution 2019-02, approving a contract with Constellation New Energy Services for the provision of electricity for pump stations. Item number 3, approval of a recommendation from Public Works Department to award the Crescent Avenue Lift Station Generator Replacement Project to Kelso Burnett Company at a cost of $42,710.00. Item number 4, approval of recommendation from the Public Works Department to award the janitorial cleaning services to the Heiser Group at an annual cost of $23,616. Item number 5, approval of payroll for period ending February 1st, 2019 in the amount of $826,946.27. Item number 6, approval of payroll for period ending February 15th, 2019 in the amount of $835,825.08. Item number 7, approval of bills for period ending February 25th, 2019 in the amount of $1,343,771.15.
Thank you, Patrick. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as
So
read
moved.
into the record? Motion by trustee Jacobs, second by trustee Balmas. Roll call, please, Andy.
Thorstensen.
Yes.
Jacobs.
Aye.
Ross.
Aye.
Garner.
Aye.
Bomas.
Aye.
Hood.
Yes.
6 aye.
All right, petitions and communications. The first is a proclamation for Women's History Month, March 2019. During Women's History Month, we reflect on both the struggles and the extraordinary accomplishments of women and honor their role in shaping the course of our nation's history. And American women of every culture, class, and ethnic background have made historic contributions to the growth and strength of our nation in countless recorded and unrecorded ways. And American women have been leaders not only in securing their own rights of suffrage and equal opportunity, but also in the abolitionist movement, the emancipation movement, the industrial labor movement, the civil rights movement, and other movements, especially the peace movement, which sought to create a more fair and just society for all. And despite these contributions, the role of American women in history have been consistently overlooked and undervalued in the literature, teaching, and study of American history. And the Village desires to join other communities and organizations across the nation in recognizing the unique contributions and accomplishments of American women. Now, therefore, I, Christina Kavarik, Mayor of the Village of Gurnee, do hereby proclaim that March 2019 will be designated as Women's History Month in the Village of Gurnee. Do I have a motion to
So
approve?
moved.
Motion by trustee Garner,
Second.
second by trustee Thorstensen. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, and the Lake County Women's Council is putting on a Women's History Luncheon this Saturday with Golda Meir as the keynote speaker. So if you haven't had a chance to get your tickets yet, I think they still have seats. No other petitions and communications. So tonight we have a presentation on something that's been worked on for quite a few months. Patrick will kick it off. I think he'll turn it over to Ellen and then our presenter.
Ellen will kick it off.
Oh, okay. Ellen?
Can't hear the microphones on? Are the microphones on?
Yes, they are.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Patrick. Can you all hear me? No. Well, we'll elevate the volume. A bit of background on this project for the board and for the public. We really, I think we all know intuitively what a wonderful family-friendly market Gurnee is for tourism. Sports tournaments are lucrative, and they are a big part of where our opportunities may lie. Our location halfway between Chicago and Milwaukee help elevate our attractiveness to those tournaments. What better spot for coaches and parents and families to spend a long weekend with all of our entertainment options in town. So we became focused particularly on this opportunity a couple years ago when working with hockey families and figure skating families and teams to understand their needs for ice time. And what became apparent was that the demand for time seemed to outstrip the supply. We began to wonder if the same was true for other sports as well. And we knew that for any sport, whether hockey, ice skating, or any sport, that the local demand would be very important to meeting the pro forma needs as well as the tourism goals that we had. So last July, the village contracted with the firm of SFA and Vieste, a team with facility planning and operations experience, as well as financing and development experience, with tourism markets around the country and similar facilities, to begin to quantify the local demand as well as the potential for tourism demand so that we could better understand what our opportunities might be. So with us tonight is Dan Morton, an advisor with SFA, to tell us sort of what they heard from our stakeholders, many of whom are here tonight. We appreciate all of the input into the process. Thank you for being here. Dan will lead us through what they heard from our stakeholders, what they concluded, and begin to lay out the roadmap for what our opportunities might be. Dan?
All right.
Welcome.
Thank you, Ellen.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good to see some of you again, and nice to meet those who I haven't met before. As Ellen mentioned, my name is Dan Morton. I'm a strategic advisor with the Sports Facilities Advisory and the Sports Facilities Management. I'll tell you a little bit more about that as part of the presentation, but I'll spend about 20 to 25 minutes going through, as Ellen outlined, our findings and recommendations for next steps, and then we'll have some time for questions. In terms of our agenda, I'll point you to the screen over here. I'm going to walk through an overview of the project, so a reminder of the scope that we're engaged for, and then talk about what definitions of success mean to the village of Gurnee, as we heard from the project team that we worked with. I'll give you an overview of SFA, SFM, as well as Vieste, who we are and what we do. Talk about the market, both segmented into local and regional opportunities, events, and then participation, some other information related to the market opportunity here in Gurnee locally and sub-regionally and regionally. I'll give you an overview of the facility that we've done our study on, that we've recommended, both for the spaces within that facility as well as the cost to develop those spaces. We'll talk about our financial performance overview. So that's a summary of the pro forma analysis we went through to forecast revenues, expenses, and ultimately the operational performance of that facility. Then talk about the economic impact overview. So as one of the goals, and we'll get into this a little more, is not just to offer this local community a great recreation and sports asset, but also, as Ellen mentioned, to capitalize on the opportunities to draw visitors in for sports tourism. We'll talk about what those impacts are in terms of the number of events, the per person spending in the market, and ultimately the total spend that we would forecast for this facility. We'll then talk about the capital finance strategy, really led by Vieste, who's an expert there, of if we look at first feasibility of the actual operation, then how could this finance strategy come together to meet the goals of the village for actual development of the facility, and then the potential surrounding adjacent mixed-use development. And I'll get into a little more details of that. We'll talk about next steps, and then I'll open it to questions. So in terms of the project, again, as I mentioned, SFA and Vieste were engaged by the village to look at feasibility of the operation first, and then what could the potential capital finance strategy be to potentially lead to a successful development of that facility. Within that scope, there's 6 major steps, excluding tonight, which would be a 7th. But we worked with the village on the first couple steps to understand what had been done in this project. As Ellen mentioned, it's a couple years in the making. So what had been done in terms of existing data to this point. We reviewed then the market and did our market analysis. We were then on site in the beginning of the process to meet with both the project team. You'll see that BDPS word is strategy session, really, where we worked with the project team to define success for both the operation of the facility as well as the overall development. And then we also met with various stakeholders within the community, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. Then the last 3 are really our deliverables. So the detailed financial forecasts for revenues, direct expenses, and then overhead costs for operations within the facility, the impact of that in the local community, and then we package that with a narrative report to understand and give background on our narrative and recommendations. So defining success, as I mentioned, we had a strategy session with the project team, representatives of the village, to understand what are the goals of first focusing on operations. So as we know, there's both two components to this, the operation of the facility and also the adjacent mixed-use development of the overall site. So focusing on operations, what does the facility itself, the Sports and Events Center, have to do in order to be deemed successful in the eyes of the project team? So we came up with four major ones with some other things mixed in between, but the first really is to be a driver of economic impact and tax revenue generation from visitation for non-locals who would not be in Gurnee but for events held at the facility. Also then contribute to the brand of Gurnee as a family destination. Obviously you're doing that now in terms of tourism, but to enhance that brand, enhance the optic of Gurnee as a destination for family-friendly tourism. The third then, focusing on operations, the facility must be self-sustaining from an operational perspective. And then lastly, improve the local community's access to top quality sports and recreation facilities which contribute to the quality of life and sense of place in the community. So those are four overarching goals and definitions of success that we heard for this facility. So just to give you a little bit of background, I won't spend too much time here. I can answer questions if appropriate. Just in terms of SFA and SFM, you'll hear us say Sports Facilities Advisory and Sports Facilities Management, two sister companies under the same umbrella. We work out of the same corporate office, but we're separated into our planning and funding services and our management services. So on the planning and funding side, we go through market assessment and projections for facility operation economic impact, similar to what we did here. And then we also help put together funding documents for going and securing funding, whether that's on the public side or on the private side or everything else in between. From a management perspective, we manage facilities across the country, all across the youth and amateur sports industry. So that can be outdoor water parks, indoor sports tourism complexes, local fitness and recreation centers, family entertainment centers, etc. But 99% of the work we do is on the youth and amateur community level. We do have relationships with universities, with professional athletes, but we really focus on communities. One thing I'll say, just to tie it together, is when we plan and fund a development or put together those documents, we look through the lens of management, but we don't assume we're going to manage everything. We have clients who hire us that manage facilities themselves, and they want to look at market opportunity, and we do that for them and make recommendations. We have municipalities that want to run facilities, and they want to know what the right number or what set would be, and we make those recommendations. And then we do have some that hire us to manage facilities full-time, to bring that expertise. But what we do and what we're committed to doing on the SFA and planning side is looking through that lens of management when we study and we put numbers in place, because we know at the end of the day, someone will answer those numbers. It could be us, and that's how we got our start in management. It could be a municipality. It could be another third party. So we know that we need to be realistic and accurate as possible on the front end, and that's the lens we look through as we do all of this. So in terms of getting in the market and the actual results, I'm going to move pretty quickly through this, and feel free to ask questions when we get through it. As I mentioned, segmented into both the regional and local market. One of the first things we do is look at who is in this area. So looking at a regional population for this type of asset for sports tourism, we look at out to a 4-hour drive time is our main area for capturing people to come into the market. While a lot of facilities will be big enough to host national and super regional events where there'd be fly-ins, that's the exception. Really, of these type of facility, you're mainly relying on drive-in within a day that you can get to a facility. So 4 hours is really our main area that we look at in terms of the region. And you can see there's over 21.2 million people within that 4-hour drive time hitting some major markets. We're then looking at, so we know who's out there. We want to understand where they're participating in events. So we've analyzed a lot of, and this is just a sampling of events. We've got hundreds in our inventory of understanding where are events happening, what are the facilities, what's the seasonality of those events, the length, how many games are they playing, what are they charging, what level are they, to really understand as much as we can about how people are traveling for events within this region. So you see there's a list of different facilities, different locations. We then obviously look at those actual competitors, and you'll see this is from a regional perspective. There are court facilities that are closer that have assets. We're really focused on those that have enough inventory to be reliable drivers of economic impact. So you'll see all the way out to, the last one there is in the Dells, which is one of the main tourism destinations in this region. So that's factored in the analysis, understanding what they're doing, what kind of draw they have, and what impact we believe, based on our experience, they'll have on your development. Potential development. So once we look at the region in terms of who's there, how they're participating, and where they're going, and what are the major destination facilities and how this facility could compete, and I failed to mention, but this is just courts, so we did this for all the assets within the model, but just want to show you an example for courts. And we'll use a different example for the local market. But then in terms of locally, we look at various drive times for our capture area, similar to how we do for regionals, but we get much more granular in terms of what your catchment areas are. So we analyze the 5, 10, 15, 20, all the way out to 60 and 90-minute drive times. You'll see a sampling of the 15, 30, and 60-minute drive times here, and then maps of some distribution looking at population density as well as median household income at different drive times, really understanding what the characteristics are of Gurnee itself and then the surrounding communities where there's pockets of people. We drive down a lot deeper. These are some overarching characteristics related to age and income and spending, but we do age segmentation to understand, what are the ages of kids, where are they, how likely are they to come spend at this facility based on our metrics that we know of. But in terms of putting this into context, and this won't be a surprise to you all, but this is a great market and there's a big opportunity here to serve the local community, and everything checks our boxes in terms of what's needed in terms of population size and characteristics for a facility like this, and for population, spending, and income. We then look at local service providers. So this is ICE's example, but we've looked at all of them within the facility as we get into what this actual facility has within it. But looking at and understanding where there are currently rinks, what their amenities are like, and then we dive into analyzing what we believe their market share is. Because we don't assume through this process that any of these facilities would stop operating or we'd steal people from those facilities. We want to understand what's the market like currently, what market share is being taken by these facilities or accommodated and served, and then what else is left over for a facility like this. So that's what we do in this analysis, and different facilities have different impacts depending on proximity, quality, model, et cetera, but that's a sampling of the local ICE facilities. We then look at sports participation as well, focused locally. What are people then participating in once we understand who they are, where they're playing, how much are they playing in different sports? You'll see different activities that can be accommodated by this facility, some more heavily than others. We look at court and ice sports, and then different populations, local, sub-regional, and regional, for what are the pools of people that we could capture to this facility. So then big piece of our market analysis is then stakeholder engagement. So everything I've shown you at this point is really the data that we deep dive into, put into our systems that allow us to understand by our metrics how a facility will perform. But it's important to color those conversations with the people who are living and breathing the sports activities in this community every day. So we met with them when we were on site, various stakeholders from the ICE community, all the way through the court activities to lodging to Visalia County, et cetera. Trying to understand what their needs are, where they're currently playing, what the issues they have with current facilities if they have them, and how a new facility could serve those needs. And then we also then did individual follow-up calls with many of the stakeholders to dive in deeper with the data and understand the current realities. So once we got through a lot of our market analysis, data collection, we then analyzed various models that could meet those definitions of success as I outlined. So looking at the facility and right-sizing to the market, and the key here is that we're both right-sizing to the ability to serve the local community and maximize bottom-line performance operationally, but also the ability to draw in non-locals and events, which requires bigger facilities that are oftentimes overbuilt for the local market. So keep in mind this is a hybrid between maximizing that operational bottom line and still being able to generate economic impact as we look at the model. So just an overview of facility, we've got really some hybrid and flexible spaces as the focus. A permanent area with 4 basketball courts. These are regulation for high school and college. The 84 by 50 is the actual court space, but you'll see enough to be able to cross line with volleyball courts. I know one of the questions we got was, the appeal of that type of facility. We see this as a great use of flexible space, and that it's not hurting us. It's actually a positive to have cross lining, be a little bit bigger, creates a bigger open space, and it's great for both, all assets, not just volleyball and basketball, but this is an asset for futsal and cheer and dance and multi-purpose convention type events, trade shows, etc. So it's really a flexible use of space in that area. That's about 33,000 square feet. We then have a ice area that includes a permanent rink as well as a secondary rink. Now the key there is the secondary rink is seasonal in this recommendation. As we've looked at existing facilities and known developments that could come in this local community in the future, we've recommended to have a temporary sheet because we believe there's demand for 2 sheets in your peak seasons, but in order to maximize your operation and then create a court atmosphere to draw non-local events and be a player in sports tourism, we've looked at a secondary rink that is seasonal that will go down really in the spring and summer, serving as an additional 4 basketball courts. That gives you a total of 8 and really elevates the facility to a major destination in the market. If you remember looking at the Dells facility, they have 10 courts. This is at 8 courts, so it wouldn't be the biggest, but looking at that flexibility, it would be a major player in the region. So that's the temporary areas. We've got storage for that and all the support areas as well. We then have a family entertainment center, which is really focused on providing other entertainment options for visitors to the facility. It also creates more revenue streams for facility through birthday parties, group events, etc. Really diversifying the facility, not just focused on sports and recreation, but the ability to serve customers in other ways as well. Some sports performance areas for training, small. This wouldn't be membership based. It's really based on fee for service for athlete training, and then support services. So in total, it's about 167,000 square feet. We then have a forecast for parking based on our metrics for a facility, which would then take up a total of about 12 acres for the facility. Keep in mind, we're also looking at this overall development, not just this specific facility. So we want to make sure we're right-sizing to the market, both locally and regionally, as I mentioned, and not using all available site area that we could, because one of the main pieces of the overall development is to drive traffic to the mixed use and attract development of that to create a facility, not just this, but also supporting amenities like retail, hotels, etc. So in terms of development costs then, we projected what we believe that facility will cost based on today's real world dollars. It's about $40 million, 40.2, looking at hard costs for the development facility, all the things to outfit, all the way through soft costs for construction, soft costs for operations, and then you'll see land costs as TBD. As one of our main goals through this process is to understand what the site requirements would be so that you can make some decisions on what that looks like. So that's TBD. We're looking at just the facility for development, and it's about $40.2 million. Once we looked at the facility, we then projected and forecasted to right-size it, how the operation would perform. I won't go into detail of all these things, but we've looked at each business unit within the facility in detail. So within the actual pro forma document, which many of you have seen, each one of these line items has backup to understand how we're forecasting those numbers, what we're charging for court rentals, what we're charging for tournaments, for local leagues, for camps, clinics, etc. So you'll see a lot of the business units, or all of the business units, both on courts, ice, and then you're supporting things such as food and beverage service, sponsorship, corporate group events, youth programs, etc. So we forecasted maturity, which is at year 5, which is in our experience where these facilities end up, is maturity about year 5 to be at about $3.8 million in top line revenue. We then looked at direct expenses, so what are the cost of goods sold for those revenues, things like staffing, referees, umpires, instructors, etc., equipment, supplies, for each one of those business units, and then the overhead expenses as well. So what is it going to cost for facility expenses, to operate the facility, to maintain it, to clean it, preserve the asset that would be invested in, for utilities, things like that. Operating expenses, which are related to the actual business, so that's where your marketing dollars, your insurance would be. Management payroll for leadership staff in the facility, and then the cost to employ all of the forecasted positions within everything for our total operating expenses. So summarizing then the operational model, if we look at revenue, cost of goods sold, and operating expenses, giving us our EBITDA, or earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, amortization. Essentially in this, well, the way we're considering it, it's before we consider the cost of capital or any debt service that could be incurred. So we're focusing on the operation, knowing this is an overall development with other components. And as you can see, we have forecasted this facility to reach operational sustainability in year 1 and get to a positive about 25% of revenue in EBITDA in year 5, which is right on near our industry average. If we look at indoor sports and recreation facilities across the country, 20 to 25% is right on average from an EBITDA perspective, which gives you some input on that. So that's, again, before debt service. I'll say as we get into the next pieces, based on what we've looked at, the goals to cover the goals or definition of success, we don't believe that this facility will cover debt service. So there will need to be another function, as we know from the capital finance strategy, in order to understand how this facility could be developed. But from the perspective of operations, we believe it's feasible in terms of the operational performance. So as I mentioned then, from an economic impact perspective, so we forecasted how those things will operate within the facility. Then we understand how we believe people will come and spend in the market from tournaments and events. So you'll see a summary of event and visitor projections. Again, we look at out to that 4-hour drive time as our regional population. We look at 90 minutes as the threshold for when people will stay overnight. So outside of 90 minutes is when people will start to book hotel rooms and spend in the market. So that's where we're looking at non-locals. So you'll see up to 53 events in year 5. All of those events are different sizes, different types, different sports, travel differently and spend differently. So that's all within the pro forma model, but this is a summary of that. We then look at non-local days and room nights as the 2 drivers of economic impact. Non-local days are the number of days spent in the market by visitors. So if I come for a 2-day event and I'm from out of town, that counts as 2 non-local days. And then room nights are booked within rooms in the area. So that's up to just under 25,000 room nights on an annual basis. From there, we look at how will those people spend. We worked with Visit Lake County as well as our proprietary system for forecasting what this spending would be based on the facilities we manage in other markets that are focused on sports tourism. So we believe that every time someone comes to the market, they'll spend $142 a day on things like lodging, transportation, entertainment, et cetera. And then that would accumulate into a total direct spend of just about $11.4 million in direct spending. From there, we looked at what tax revenue generation potential there could be, looking at various pieces through sales tax, hotel, motel. One thing I'll point out is you'll see the additional resort tax for Great Wolf Lodge. We haven't assumed anything there. That's not to say we didn't think people would stay there. We just don't know, based on this analysis, how much will be captured within that facility. So we wanted to show it, but don't have any numbers put to that yet. So there's a potential for increase as well from there. But it gets to about $426,000 in new tax revenue generation. Now the key here is that is all of the activity happening within this facility. What needs to happen as part of next steps, and we'll get into that, is to understand what would actually be captured within the village and can contribute back to tax revenue generation. So we need to understand a little bit more about leakage and what the potentials are here. But the key here also is that we want to show that max potential as part of the development could be attraction of more lodging options within the community. So again, just to remind, back to our definitions of success, we're looking at a facility that must create a driver in economic impact and new tax revenue, which we have confirmed we believe there's the opportunity to do that in this market with the facility analyzed. We will enhance the Gurnee as a destination for tourism, both within the facility for family-friendly options with the Family Entertainment Center and some of those other things, as well as because of the community you have and the opportunities within it. It's a self-sustaining model from an operation perspective, so it checks that box, although we don't believe it'll cover debt service. Again, that's why we're driving at the capital finance strategy for the overall development. And then we believe this facility will improve the local area's quality of life and access to sports and recreation developments through the programming of those spaces. So in terms of the capital finance strategy, again, once we looked at operations, then we want to understand what are the goals and objectives for the overall development from the village of Gurnee. So just summarized, really the vision is for a mixed-use development anchored by a sports and events facility. So that would be sports events facility with then retail, other commercial development, hotel, lodging, et cetera, surrounding it. create a positive tax economic impact to the Village of Gurnee without impacting the bond rating or the general fund, so limiting that liability. Minimizing the investment by the village to necessary development incentives and infrastructure. Those are to be determined at this point, but we haven't included that in the capital finance strategy to come from anything but those things to come from the village. And then avoid asset ownership or operational responsibility from the village. So again, those are the objectives of the capital finance strategy for the overall development. Based on the work that Vieste did using our feasibility analysis, there are some significant challenges to executing on those goals and objectives based on the operation of the facility. These just listed out a couple of those, but some being the land. Obviously, there isn't land under control at this point, and there is not a development plan for that site beyond the facility operation. So then what that creates is unknowns from a feasibility support perspective, so unknowns of what the mixed-use commercial looks like or retail and the potential revenue generation. So if we look at this overall, there is tax revenue generation coming back, but it would not cover, the facility won't cover debt service. So not knowing what that revenue generation of the commercial development would be, we don't know if this would be something that could attract investment by, private or creation of a public-private partnership. So that's a challenge. Equity requirement commitment, that limits the private capital sources because there will not be a return on investment from a private perspective on the facility operations. So you're limiting who would be interested in this investment. And then tax increment capture vehicle, as I mentioned, tax revenue, we don't have anything that's guaranteeing all of that revenue to the facility, which is a challenge if you're developing it to do that, and then that's leaking out into the market. So that'll be a concern as we look at what that mixed use could be and to maximize the capture of that tax revenue. So looking at four real strategies from the capital finance perspective, one would be and this is who you would partner with, one would be a strategic sports and events facility partner. That partner would assume total liability and responsibility for funding, development, ownership, and of sports and events facility. However, based on the operation, again, the debt service, that's really limiting on who is actually out there to do that and whether that would make sense for them just looking at operations. The second would be an integrated developer, so that's someone interested in both the facility development as well as the mixed use commercial. And then bifurcated public procurement, which would be a village-controlled process where analyzing and tracking developers independently, looking at sports facility and then the other developments, which is really key as the village has some specific goals for this facility. As I mentioned earlier, economic impact does not necessarily drive bottom line profitability, it drives visitation. If you're a private developer, the incentives are different if you're looking at how you can return on your money. So it's important for the village to control that process so that the goals for developing this facility are protected. And then the other would be an underlying public-private partnership structure that has the real estate master development in a public-private partnership, which integrates the village even more in terms of control. So essentially, the last two are recommended to be explored, but as I mentioned from the challenges, there's unknowns within the project that need to be established and figured out moving forward. So we've recommended several next steps for understanding the potential to create a development that is attractive for a third party to come in and look at sports and events center, as well as mixed-use development in one project that executes on the village's goals. The key here is that we've outlined these steps, but they don't all have to happen at one time. We'll recommend that you gain traction or control of the primary site, again, to control that aspect of it. Develop a conceptual land use plan, so knowing that 12 acres is for the sports facility, key is to understand, okay, what else then could fit on the site that's selected in terms of that mixed use, to understand, is there even the potential to create enough tax revenue through other things to make it make sense to develop the sports facility. From there, then, we would recommend commission of a hospitality study as well as a corporate sponsorship study to understand what's the potential for those other pieces beyond sports facility. Just like you did for sports to understand that operation, we'd recommend to do that for several other things, as you're creating the plan for this development. But we see that, and that could be in multiple phases as well, right? If we understand what could potentially work on the site to justify, okay, then should we go get a hospitality study because it could potentially work. So then obviously the second step would be that bifurcated public procurement phase, if proven feasible through those other steps and those other studies, and the potential to execute on RFQs to find developers willing to accomplish the goals of the village, both for the overall development and the operation. So in conclusion, next steps action items for overall is develop that plan to determine the land ownership, land use, and create a plan for both development of the facility and long-term financing of the development. Those additional studies are key to understand the mixed-use opportunity for the site and what level of equity or funding could come from corporate sponsorships. Formal discussions must be initiated with potential strategic partners regarding future investment, and then operating structure must be created to ensure top-tier management, marketing, services, and utilities are in place for the facility. That's really focused on our recommendations for operation. Within that are the expenses that are needed to manage the facility, to market the facility properly. So that needs to be followed in terms of the next steps, making sure that that plan's in place if someone else is coming in to develop the facility to ensure it will perform the way it's projected. So that's it for the specific presentation. I'd like to open it up to any questions you have and anything that you want to discuss based on the process and what we summarized.
Excellent job to take a very big report and get it down to that few slides. So thinking, I know you've done a lot of hard work. You had a great team. I appreciate the amount of time that you spent in town, and I appreciate all our stakeholders that participate in the focus groups and stuff that are here tonight. So it's truly a big community effort to get this far. Trustees may have some questions, specific questions. Okay, Trustee Thorstensen.
Hi there.
Hey.
I reviewed this one with Ellen ahead of time because this seemed to be one of the key questions that we'd probably all have in terms of risk of us building it and how many other facilities could be built within our region that would then take away from our, I guess, the desire to come to our facility. Does that make sense?
It does.
So not just Lincolnshire, but
the 4-hour region,
Lincolnshires.
right?
Yeah, like anybody else that thinks that this is a good play for their community as well.
Yeah, it's absolutely potential and is a long-term risk. You know, one of the things that factors into the forecast is that Gurnee is unique in terms of the destination for other things. I mean, you've got a Great America right there, family attraction, which is something that's a decision point for people who are traveling. As you know, we've seen the proliferation of making tournaments and events for youth sports into vacations. So it's not just about the facilities, it's about the destination. And we think this is a great place to come and play. So that's an advantage you have over other communities. But you're absolutely right. There is the possibility of development of facilities within the 4-hour region. That's a big area, right? A lot of people in those areas that could impact the ability to run the events and reach what we forecasted. One piece I will say, though, is that we forecasted this facility, again, as I mentioned, with marketing budgets, management in place, top-tier ability to go out and get those things. So we believe strongly in the operation that's there, that just because another facility opens doesn't mean we'll lose everything, right? There will be competition, but it won't be, devastating to this because there's a brand to create within this facility and within this community. One more piece, and if there's any follow-up, from a more localized perspective, a lot of these facilities, and you can see in the current facilities that are in this market, are all hosting events and sometimes together, right? So when we see 4 courts, when we've got ice up, 2 ice sheets, and we only have 4 courts, there is still the potential to host events, even though you're not as big as you would be to be a headquarters, with other facilities within the region. So attracting bigger events to combine together. You'll see that a lot with ice. You really need 2 ice sheets to be a tournament destination, but in this market, a lot of the ice sheets are used together to create events. So while there could be impact, we also believe that it will help in terms of the inventory for drawing larger events when the facilities are within close enough proximity. Obviously, if it's built 2 hours away, that's not going to execute on that. But we believe there's opportunity as well to accommodate bigger events through multiple facilities. Does that help? Is there anything specific then beyond that?
It does, thank you.
Okay.
Trustee Jacobs.
Sure, thank you. What is the impact of not having outdoor sports as part of this package? I noticed specifically we included as part of the stakeholders lacrosse, baseball, folks like that, but I don't see anything for softball, baseball fields, lacrosse fields, soccer fields, and potentially maybe even field hockey fields.
Yeah. And so what do you mean by impact? What would it be to include
Yeah,
it?
I mean, what would it be to include it? I mean, because we're talking about, Gurnee as a destination, and, I think I would look at most of these sports as winter sports, for lack of a better term. Sure, we have people that play hockey in the summer. Sure, we have people that play basketball in the summer. Sure, we have people that play volleyball in the summer, but with the exception of volleyball, most of these sports, the active time to get people engaged in them is really fall through late spring. And, a lot of people, and you mentioned the word vacation already, vacation time, with the exception for winter break and maybe spring break, the vacation time is really summer.
Summer, yep. Yeah,
So
absolutely.
that's a big concern of mine.
Yeah. So there's two main reasons why, and we analyzed that in the beginning. You mentioned the stakeholders. We looked at the opportunity regionally. Two main reasons why they're not included in the facility program recommended. One being really the size and land use of those assets. So when we look at a field, either a multi-purpose field for soccer, lacrosse, football, et cetera, or baseball, softball, diamond field, you're at about 4 to 5 acres when you think of the field as well as parking, setbacks, et cetera. So in order to be a tourism destination, we're really looking at assets in the 8 field range. So you start to multiply that, and you're getting into tripling the size of the facility that we have in terms of acres. So in making sure, as part of the goal of this overall development being mixed use, we looked at maximizing what we could do in a small amount of acreage, because other development around it will be key. So then the other piece is also the goal of this being not a liability of the village, or not the responsibility of the village in terms of operation. There's much less opportunity to create a self-sustaining model when we look at fields than there is on the indoor side, based on how those assets perform. Again, the size of those assets, as well as the appeal and the ability to generate revenue. If you look at most of the outdoor complexes, especially the major ones, those are municipally owned and subsidized a lot of times through those communities, which was a goal we were making sure that wasn't the case for this facility. So we looked at it, and yeah, absolutely, those are great drivers of visitation and tourism. We don't believe that they would reach the definition of success both for the operation as well as the overall mixed-use development. Does that make sense?
Makes sense, but I'm still having trouble personally trying to figure out how we're going to get this thing filled up during the summer with those particular sports. But thank you.
Yeah.
Trustee Ross?
When you're saying mixed use, it sounds like a lot of sports. So did you ever consider other things in there, like a stage and maybe some music venues, something like that, that could?
Yeah, so our focus is really on as flexible of space as we can for use. So while we don't have this as a major concert venue, for example, for musical performance, those open spaces such as the court area, those are used in all of our facilities for other types of events, such as performing arts, for cheer, for dance, those types of things. But we're really focused on being as flexible as possible, focused on the most reliable generators of that tourism. And those that happen over the court spaces and the ice spaces. So while we don't have anything specific for those uses, absolutely in a flexible use space like this, those can be accommodated, and are part of the projections. You'll see that there's other events, not just basketball, not just volleyball, but there's other events that happen over the course, and then there's other group events that happens in the various flex and team rooms that we have within the facility, again, to use it as flexibly as we can, so that we're not dedicating space to things that may not be revenue generating enough for the bottom line to justify them. Does that make sense?
And the high school has expressed interest. They're paying about $60,000 for 2 hours at Hoffman Estates, and they would love to be able to hold graduation in Gurnee again. So, but there's no facility anywhere in this area that could host a graduation for Warren or for Woodland even. They have to split theirs up too. So that's another possibility. Trustee Hood?
Yes. You'd mentioned about the operations does not support the debt service, but no numbers, so how far off is that?
So depending on the capital finance strategy, it's in the $1.2 million range in order to get the debt service coverage ratio needed. So it's a significant bogey, but that's the key to understanding what that mixed-use development could generate to know if we can balance that and if there's the opportunity to balance that.
So it's a $1.2 million shortfall if an entity was operating the facility if they had to cover the debt service.
That's right.
And then, as far as our next step is concerned, if we were to take a next step as a village, just a small step, what would you say that would be, and what would be the cost attached to the village to make that step?
Yeah, so the step would be those first two that I described, looking at potential securing the land, so getting that under control, whether that has to happen right away or just get an agreement in place to have the right of refusal to do that, and then doing the conceptual land use. So we believe that's key because we're using 12 acres. We need to do an order of magnitude exercise, or I say we, I apologize. The village needs to do an order of magnitude exercise to understand if there's even the potential to generate that shortfall by those spaces. In terms of the cost to do that, we haven't put that together, so we can certainly follow up on that, but I don't have a specific number to give you for that. But those two, really understanding the land use would be key first steps.
So if we don't secure the land, then everything else falls. Is that really what we need to do?
So in relatively close to the beginning, because if you want to control the goals that you have in terms of creating the destination, how it's outlined, as well as the development, how it's outlined, that'll be key.
Okay, thanks.
Trustee Balmas?
So, bring it down to my level.
Yeah, sure.
Basically, this is not my vision by any means,
Okay.
but are we saying that if we were to purchase the land or have control of the land, would you have investors then to build it? Or are you saying that we, as a village, are the ones who are going to buy the land, put up the building, and then find somebody else to run it for us?
Yeah, so the latter. We don't have specific investors lined up. We obviously work with different organizations for varying degrees of development of facilities, but we believe there needs to be more due diligence to attract someone, a developer, that would come develop this facility, and that would be, sorry, go ahead. So,
If we had the land, you would find an investor, or you would not find an investor?
So we could help with that, but it would be an RFQ process, a request for, or an RFP process, request for proposals for a developer to develop it based on the studies that you've had done. So operation of the facility, that it can be operationally sustaining, that it can generate the economic impact that we forecasted, and then how a hotel could perform, how the retail could perform to attract investment if those numbers pencil out to creating something that's attractive. But we don't have the ability to bring a specific investor in, but we can help put together that process for you.
And we're talking what dollar amounts?
We have some ideas. I'll go through them. We have some proposals or some numbers.
We can talk about.
Yeah, this is just a presentation of the feasibility, period. There would be a whole nother discussion if we wanted to do anything with the feasibility study. See, Dan's just trying to lay out what the next steps would be.
I get that.
Once you have a feasibility, but tonight is just, is it feasible or not? Trustee Gurnee?
No question.
All right. And so I'll kind of segue
Yeah.
from what I just said, because this was, again, feasibility. So based on the feasibility study completed by SFA and Fiesta, we do know that there is a market for youth sports complex, that the youth sports complex is operationally feasible with a positive EBITDA. The village needs to control the integrity of the project without having to take risk or make a direct investment, which has always been one of our goals from the beginning. In order to avoid risk or investment by the village, we need private capital. Private capital would be necessary, and it would be difficult but not impossible to complete the capital finance transaction, and we need to learn more about need to learn more to fully proceed with the project. So with the feasibility study in hand, here's what we know we don't know. These are the next steps. We don't know land cost or control. We yet don't fully know the value proposition from private capital investment. We don't know who the private capital partners might be or the probability of reaching an agreement. So some next steps that we could have a proposal prepared to bring to the board for consideration, but I have another step that I'm thinking of in between that. Obviously, we need to be frugal and cautious with the next steps, but if we wanted to do anything more, we have to understand the land cost and control, do some preliminary land planning to figure out if the rest of the land could generate uses that would motivate private capital to come. We'd need some professional assistance with that, preliminarily value the youth sports complex asset as a strategic investment, and help pitch it to potential capital investors. So there's a lot more. I do think we need the Economic Development Committee to help us come up with a recommendation for us to consider and sort through some of this. It's a huge gamble. We've said that from the beginning, but I would remind you, we're talking about dollars the same way we were in 2008. We took a huge gamble with $10 million with the Simon Group for them to do the capital infrastructure that enabled the Macy's. And we were in a terrible economy. We knew we were in a terrible economy, and we sat up here and I said, we can't save our way out of it. We've got to invest our way out of it, and that has saved us for the last 10 years with our sales tax continuing to grow. So this is not about this year or next year. This is about the next 10 years. And if we don't want a property tax, which every single one of us is committed to no property tax and to funding this village on tourism and sales tax, we have to do something to make that happen over the next 10 years. So this may not be the right thing. This was just a feasibility, but this is very similar to that decision that we made back in 2008 to invest in a bad economy, and we can all see it coming right now. Macroeconomy looks great. Microeconomy looks very scary right now for the village. So these are the things you do now in order to position yourself when that happens. So obviously you guys know what my recommendation is, but I think the Economic Development Committee could meet a few times and take some of these ideas about the private partnerships and recommend what we should do. The estimates we've gotten were in about the same range as what this cost us for the second phase. Some additional steps that may make it a little more clearer whether this would be a good investment or not. But we're not at that point yet. There's more homework to do. But I don't know that it's a good idea for the board to consider that proposal without getting some help from the Economic Development Committee. So that was really going to be my ask tonight, was could we let the Economic Development Committee dig into what the second phase should or should not include and help bring a recommendation forward for the board to consider. Or you can just say, no, you're not interested in a phase 2 at all. Or we could let the Economic Development Committee do some work. Trustee Thornton?
As a member of the Economic Development Committee, I would say, and certain parties here in the room are as well, that we need some more muscle on the Economic Development Committee for this specific purpose. As you know, our discussions in the past have been a variety of policy and planning and very, I'll call it small efforts. I would call this a complex project. And so while I certainly believe it needs some more vetting and discovery, that the Economic Development Committee could be a very good committee, I'm just saying I'd like you to consider some other of our partners in the community that are here or groups that could help give us a little bit more muscle.
Somebody with a little more expertise on these types of transactions.
Exactly.
Certainly, this is very serious, so we want to make sure we do enough due diligence. Trustee Hood?
Doesn't cost us anything to take the second step that you're suggesting, and it also, I think, it honors our initial investment of $48,000 in this project to not leave it where it's at. But I think we need a lot more to get us to spend more money on it, I think, to feel more comfortable at least. So if there is partners from the community that can add to the Economic Development Committee, I think that'd be a really nice addition and give us a level of comfort to either say absolutely no, the investment was wise, or we need to invest more money to see if there's an answer there.
Trustee Jacobs?
You've heard my trepidations about this project tonight. I was all for it from the beginning, but after hearing tonight, I do have my trepidations. So based upon those trepidations, I would like to step forward and join that committee to see if I can allay my concerns and help this move forward.
Join the committee to decide if we should go to phase 2.
Yes, I would like to have some input.
We may be into an open meeting.
If that's the case,
We'll have to look into it.
Yeah, we may be able to put 2 trustees, but there's that line with open meetings. Brian will help us with that, but I think Ellen and Pat could probably come up with some ideas on who would add weight to the Economic Development Committee to kind of sort through. We've been given an outline for phase 2. If we wanted to go that direction, they could kind of work on that and sort through it, and then come back with a recommendation on whether we should go to phase 2 or not. There's definitely more work that needs to be done. We could bring something forward at the next meeting, couldn't we?
March 4th, next meeting is next week.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
That's next week.
I keep forgetting March. February is a short meeting, so the meeting after that, yeah, we don't want to do March 4th because it's budget hearing. So by the meeting after that, I'm sure you can help us with it too. Who may some good partners be? You met a lot of people in the community who may be a good partner to help the Economic Development Committee come up with what we should do for phase 2. So we plan on the second week of March? Okay. All right. Any other questions for Dan? All right. Again, excellent job. I thank you for all the time you spent in the community and all our stakeholders. Feasibility looks good. We got more homework to do. But all these things are done in baby steps. So thank you. Thank
you.
Eric for me too.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, Ellen.
Let me get this sorted here. All right, that is it on reports.
Correct.
No old business. So we'll move on to new business. First item is approval of ordinance 2019-09,
09.
granting a zoning text amendment to Article 13.12, master sign plans of the Gurnee zoning ordinance.
Sure. So you had a memo from our planning manager, Tracy Velkover, on this. The zoning ordinance requires that new office and industrial multi-tenant developments provide a master sign plan that requires the signs to be unified in at least 3 different ways. The ways they can be unified includes font style, lettering color, background, sign type, etc. About 3 years ago, we amended this to require that retail tenants only need to unify it in 2 ways instead of 3. This was causing a problem with franchise retail businesses that didn't have the flexibility to adjust the signs to meet the 3 ways to unify. Fast forward to today, office and service tenants are also having the same problem. A lot of them are franchised, and they're having a hard time finding 3 ways to make all the signs match and unify. So these staff actually brought this forward to amend this to make it match the retail. So instead of having the 3 ways, they must be unified. As I said, with the font style, letter, color, background, etc. Staff is recommended to make that 2 ways. So for all signs and that are underneath the master sign plan. So this will help alleviate some concern that these different users have had. As I said, they don't have the flexibility that we had initially thought when we put the zoning ordinance together.
Motion to approve?
Okay, motion by trustee Thorstensen, second by trustee Jacobs. Discussion? All right, roll call, please, Andy.
Thorstensen.
Yes.
Jacobs.
Aye.
Ross.
Aye.
Garner.
Aye.
Thomas.
Aye.
Hood.
Yes.
6 aye.
All right, motion carries. Item number 2, approval of ordinance 2019-10, authorizing the execution of an intergovernmental agreement with the Village of Gurnee and the Warren Newport Public Library District to contract for the repair and maintenance of parking lots.
Sure. So the library focuses on books, not so much parking lots. We every year have a patching program that we put out to bid. So the library approached us. They need some work on the parking lot to see if they could partner with us on that. Sent a couple of our engineers over there to look at their parking lot. It's not that much work. So what we had discussed was having them jump on our contract. We'll measure out how much needs to be done, have it done underneath our contract, and then submit an invoice to the library, so they'll pay us their fair share. So Attorney Winter put together a pretty short agreement that states such. The library has taken a look at it. Their board actually passed the agreement, so now it's before the village board for consideration.
All right, questions from the trustees?
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by trustee Balmas, second by trustee Garner. Roll call, please, Andy.
Torstenson.
Yes.
Jacobs.
Aye.
Ross.
Aye.
Garner. Aye. Balmas.
Aye.
Hood.
Yes.
6 aye.
All right, item number 3, approval of ordinance 2019, approving the purchase of real estate located at 0 Milwaukee Avenue, Gurnee, Illinois. You want me to?
If you
All
want,
right,
sure.
okay. As we've talked and included in our capital plan for the last few years, is logistically, there are advantages to a third station, not a full station, smaller station, but it would significantly cut down on some of the crisscrossing from side to side, which requires equipment, personnel, and a building. Earlier this fall, you approved the personnel through the use of the SAFER grant, and we're in the process of getting new staff. We have the ambulances, thanks to our partnership and a donation that we've received in the past from the Waukegan Warren Fire Protection District. We have enough ambulances. So now it's the building, and obviously we need land. So we were approached for a land donation in the area that we, Chief Kavanaugh, thought would be most efficient for our response times. So we have a land, it's not for all the land, it's just for a small piece of it, but it is in the area that we wanted, so we did not want to pass it up. I am negotiating with other landowners, having discussions with other landowners in that area to see if we can cobble more land together to make it feasible for a third station, but right now this is just a donation for a small piece. We may use it and we may not. Did I capture it correctly, Chief Kavanaugh? Okay. So really, it's just really, for $10, we get some land that we may be able to use. And if we can't, we end up not getting enough in that area, then we'll move on to another parcel.
Make a motion.
Second.
Motion by trustee Garner, second by trustee Ross. Roll call, please, Andy.
Torstenson.
Yes.
Jacobs.
Aye.
Ross.
Aye.
Garner. Aye. Balmas.
Aye.
Hood.
Yes.
6 aye.
All right, we're halfway there. All right. What was that ordinance?
That was 11. This is a resolution of 3. The next one's a resolution.
Oh,
So,
okay, that's
03.
why I'm off, okay. All right, item number 4 is approval of a resolution 2019-03, approving the creation of the 2020 Gurnee Complete Count Committee.
Sure.
We are right now, ma'am, our village administrator will always give a brief overview to the trustees for anything that's on the agenda.
So the 2020 census is coming up, and the Census Bureau has requested that the village create.
Ma'am, he really needs to speak so we can hear, and it's in the microphone, so you'll be able to hear it on the recording.
The Census Bureau has requested that the village create a complete count committee. Complete count committee is community leaders, schools, religious organizations, and civic groups to help educate the public about the census. They work together to get the word out to make sure that all citizens are counted. The resolution was provided by the Census Bureau. It says that the village supports creating a complete count committee. Also states that the mayor and village board will appoint members to this committee and appoints the assistant to the village administrator as the chair of the committee. So at this point, we're just looking to move forward with the resolution, and then we'll come back at a future village board meeting with potential committee members for the village board to consider and appoint.
There is a PowerPoint included. Anybody object that we have to participate in the census?
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by trustee Balmas, second by trustee Jacobs. Roll call, please, Andy.
Thorstenson.
Yes.
Jacobs.
Aye.
Ross.
Aye.
Garner. Aye. Balmas.
Aye.
Hood.
Yes.
6 aye.
All right, motion carries. All right, last item on our agenda is public comment. And I'll remind you, as I have every week for the last few months, it's not discussion, it's not dialogue. We ask for your name. Your address is voluntary, only because if we hear something that we haven't heard before and we need to do follow-up, your address helps us identify you. So there's no limit at the public comment time period, or there's no limit on the amount of time that you can speak. So public comment is open.
Hi, can everybody hear me? Okay, I don't know if this is on or not, but I'll try to speak up. My name is Laurel Winfin. My husband and I are residents of Gurnee and the Hickory Haven subdivision. In the feasibility study, SFA names 5 or 6 challenges to the sports complex project. The number one challenge that SFA identified is land control. Putting aside the fact that Gurnee does not even own the identified parcels of land, how can the village even consider going to a second-tier go, no-go level of development study until the current functions of this land have been assessed? SFA was not hired to do this. They are certainly not qualified to assess its current natural resources and the environmental impact that those resources have on our community today. Before even thinking about pursuing this second tier of go, no-go level of study, which will cost the village more money, the following environmental aspects must be studied on this particular site: stormwater runoff and flood reduction, air quality created by this open land, noise reduction, the current wildlife in residence and the potential disruption of the same, current plant composition. What about wetland soils? For example, I recently contacted an organization called Open Lands. For those not familiar with Open Lands, it's an organization that's been around since about 1963, and they protect the natural and open spaces of northeastern Illinois and the surrounding region. Many of you, if not all of you, who are residents of this county know how much open land we have and how precious it is. I spoke to the director of Lake County programs for Open Lands, Sarah Sorose. She informed me that if 1 acre or more of wetland soils are impacted, the Army Corps of Engineers has to be involved. Maybe there aren't any wetland soils on these parcels. Maybe there are. Who knows? I don't, and I assume the village doesn't know either. My point, and what I'm trying to communicate on behalf of myself, my husband, and other concerned neighbors, is that there has not been any environmental impact studies completed yet on this proposed site. And that must be done prior to pursuing any further development planning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and all the members of the board. First of all, I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. My name is Wasim Iftikhar. I am the past president of your neighborhood church, Islamic Foundation North, and I had the privilege of interacting with quite a few interfaith leaders in the past week and past month. When some of the community people approached me with regards to the issue of ethylene oxide toxicity, I took a very serious look and consulted quite a few scientists in this area. I myself have spent 3 decades at Abbott, before Abbott Labs and at Abbott's Labs, so it was a thing of interest to me. And I have come to the conclusion that while there is no question about the sincerity of this board and the fact that they are considering all aspects, there are other things that I would like to submit to you after consultation with a lot of members of my community and other communities, and these are as follows. Number one, there is no question in my mind, and there should be no question in the mind of anybody who knows any chemistry or anything with regards to public health, that ethylene oxide is a very well-known carcinogen. Even those who work in labs and others are taking extreme precautions, and so this was really concerning that there are really documented evidence of ethylene chloride being highly carcinogenic, and of unknown etiology diseases have been associated with this chemical. So that is an established fact. Nobody can dispute that fact. No scientist will ever say that it's not true. Number two is the fact that when it is transmitted into the air, everybody has equal access to air, so everybody breathes that, and we do not know the long-term effect on the DNA and also the long-term effect on the other disease states. So it is established that there are 2 areas that we need to fully understand and appreciate. One, it is a known carcinogen. Secondly, the emission levels of what I have seen, and I have done a lot of research in this area, is extremely concerning to me. I have property here in Gurnee, I live somewhere else, and we are planning to move hopefully sometime soon because of the proximity of the church to us. So those 2 are established. Now, what is we have an issue, we know what the problem is now. So what is the solution? And they have debated the solution for a long time. And I have to say that this was devoid of emotions. This was not about emotion, this was about facts. So what are the solutions that I totally agree with you? First of all, that emission in the factory itself, or the transmission in the factory versus the transmission in the air. So we have to do the air testing because people are working in the factory, but everybody is breathing the air outside. So the agreement was among the people, and I have consulted with scientists, that air testing is an absolute must. So that is an established fact. And again, looking at the air testing, it has to be done in a way that there are 2 aspects. One is conflict of interest. The second is appearance of conflict of interest. And you know, and I know as a scientist, that if there is an appearance of conflict of interest in any clinical study or non-clinical study, it's an established fact that that is tainted. Even we have to say that there is no dire vested interest of people sponsoring it. So the point is that the sponsorship of this study, and I'm not questioning the integrity or the wisdom of the people across the aisle here, I'm just saying facts which are facts anybody can test. So the fact is that it has to be unbiased. Unbiased means the sponsor has to keep his hands off hands, no involvement except providing the data. That makes it so important. It's so important because tomorrow in the test, in the code of the scientist, you can say this is a Pew study. In the cost of statisticians, you can say it's a Pew study. So it is important that study is done without any bias and involvement of the people with vested interest, whether it is vested interest from the community or whether it is a vested interest from the manufacturer or interest groups or whatever. So that has to be taken care of. Number 2, any plan has to have a timeline. I saw a wonderful presentation today, and I think plans have to have timelines, and these timelines have to be clearly exhibited publicly because it's a public concern. So any discussion around it should tailor around not only the scope but also the timeline. So that has to be very, very important. Any publication around what we are planning to do has to be timeline. So summary-wise, no vested interest, timelines, clear-cut scientific approach is an absolute must, and this will help Gurnee. This will help Gurnee in the sense that people will say, okay, the world is watching, we are setting a precedent, and we have to really, really do something in a clean fashion. I know this is the intention of you all. Now, third part is the anxiety level. My community, our interfaith community is very concerned. Their mothers and the grandmothers, I have grandchildren, and they are really honestly very, very afraid of what is happening, because unknown. So my point again is communication would be very important. I think communication by people who are neutral parties to it, and in talking to a very, very important senator, I won't name her, but she is one of the proponents, and I had the privilege as the Islamic Foundation president to have interacted with many of these leaders, and they have assured us that this EPA is quite a reliable thing in the IAP or in Illinois EPA has to take this lead and has to really move out to open where there is no question. When we do clinical studies and done Humira studies, we will never allowed to really go into the protocol. The committee is doing it. So my point is, make it scientifically solid so that nobody can raise a finger on this issue. Ladies and gentlemen, I really honestly saying this, that this thing is not going to go away. It's out. The cat is out of the box. So let us make it in such a manner that the name of Gurnee stands and shines as something that has really done very, very, very well. That will be good for tourism, that will be good for economics, that will be good for everything. I've taken note. So I have taken, again, this is not a question of us versus you versus him. You are public servants. I am a public servant, and I know the amount of balance you have to do. But after looking at all of these things, it is a good balance to do this. And I wish you all the best of luck, and may God bless us and keep us honest and happy. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name's Jennifer Comiza. I'm a lifelong resident of Lake County, and I'm a teacher, and I raise my family here in Gurnee. I have twin 6-year-old girls, go to Woodland, and they have drawn almost every breath of their life here in Gurnee. And I'm here because I'm also gravely concerned about the situation of the ETO emissions at Vantage and at nearby Medline. And I really think it's tantamount to a health crisis. And so while I'm really looking forward to a legislative solution that's going to ban ETO emissions outright, I really implore the village board to really expedite this process by leading and joining with other municipalities to commence this independent air testing and monitoring as soon as possible. Because, I'll just say from my heart that I'm not marking time right now in days and weeks and months, but in the number of breaths that my children are taking here until this is resolved. Thank you.
My name is So. I'm from Grays Lake. I had an opportunity to go to the state capitol and testify regarding to ethylene oxide. One of the things that I said is, quote, "We need air testing conducted by an independent third-party company not picked by Medline or Vantage to know what we are inhaling. Enough time has passed. It's time to act. Lake County needs air testing now." And that's what I said when I testified. And I think the momentum is here and things are moving along. I know, Mayor, you talked with EPA and Illinois EPA senators, and I know you're working on this issue and trying to do the testing, trying to figure out what kind of testing is good. And I think you talked with Lake County Health Department also, and they just made a public statement along with Gurnee, Waukegan Health Department is taking measures to assure air monitoring will occur. So I think that's very good. I hope what they meant is independent. And although I think the final goal is for EPA to do the testing, meanwhile, everybody knows that Willowbrook is doing the independent testing. And during the EPA webinar, when they were talking about the result of the EPA monitoring test, they said that they used the Willowbrook's independent testing result to assess the risk also. So EPA is using the independent testing data also. So I think it's very valuable to do the independent testing. Thank you.
My name is Tatiana. I live in Providence Village here on O'Plain Road between Medline and Vantage. And I have 3 children that are very young, and they will go to Woodland School, and they will spend here at least, if they're going to finish school here, at another 10 to 12 years. I'm very concerned about their health, and I really do not want them to be diagnosed with cancer in their early 20s. And I'm very concerned about all the tourists that come to our beautiful community with Six Flags, with the best aquatic center in Lake County. We have a great Wolf Lodge. We have so many beautiful facilities, and we are inviting people to come with their families and kids to entertain them and spend their precious time together, and they do not deserve to breathe this toxic air that we have here. So I truly believe that you will find funds to perform the independent air testing that will give us peace of mind. Thank you.
Hello, Mayor Kovarik, Village Board members. Thank you so much for this opportunity to speak to you tonight. My name is Susan Hemming. I am a 24-year resident of Gurnee. I come here tonight as a concerned citizen, as a mom, as a neighbor of you. I know that all of you are concerned about the ethylene oxide issue. I know that you've been researching this and discussing this. I have been reading everything that I can in the media and the papers. I attended the meeting last week in Waukegan, the city council meeting there, and I asked Mayor Cunningham and the aldermen to go forward with independent testing, and I spoke to them and said that I would be coming here tonight and asking you to work with them. I asked them to work with you, and I ask that you also work with the cities of Waukegan and any other city nearby that might also be affected. The reason why independent testing is so important is because government runs slowly. We all know that. We are very thankful to you that you are concerned about this issue. We're very thankful that our U.S. reps, our U.S. senators, and our state reps and senators are getting involved. But the wheels just turn slowly, and we know that things will happen more quickly if you do the independent testing. Every day that goes by is crucial. Every day that goes by, we're breathing more of this gas. I live 1.5 miles from Vantage. Vantage's self-reported numbers, as you know, was reported to the EPA, are nearly 3 times higher than Willowbrook's in 2014. That was reported by the Chicago Tribune. So we know these things. We know that you're concerned, that you are also residents of this village, and it is incumbent on you to do the right thing for yourselves, for your families, and for the citizens of Gurnee. Please. I heard a presentation tonight. I understand that you paid $48,000 for this presentation to be done for you. So the quote that was brought to Waukegan last week was for about that amount of money. Independent testing can be done for about $48,000. And if you share that cost with other municipalities, it's just a drop in the bucket. It is worth our lives. I am a cancer survivor. I have a neighbor here tonight who is also a cancer survivor. I'm not saying that our cancer was caused by this, but we don't know. And we do know that ethylene oxide is a carcinogen. We know that it was published in the Tribune that the census tracts near Medline have an increased incident of cancer. That's published fact. So please, I beg you, to go forward with the independent testing. And I would just like to conclude, the Lake County News Sun published this morning at 9:40 a.m., they urged you, in an op-ed piece, they urged you to go forward with the independent testing. As someone else said, this issue is not going to go away. We're very concerned about our health. Very concerned about our health. Please, I urge you, work with the other municipalities and pay for this independent testing. If it comes back that it's nothing, wonderful. But if the levels are high, it's the independent testing that's going to make the Illinois EPA act. Thank you very much.
Good evening, Ryan Horth. I live at 4981 South Road. And so our federal legislators, the senators and representatives, have now called for the U.S. EPA to conduct their own truly independent testing. State Senator and Representative Melinda Bush and Joyce Mason have now called for the U.S. EPA to conduct its own testing. And one of the things that pushed the EPA to do its own testing in Willowbrook was actually the villages down there moving ahead with their own testing. That enabled pressure that basically moved the EPA into gear to say, hey, we've got to do something, along with other things. In the, of course, this last week, everyone saw that Sterigenics was shut down by the state government, and then they sued to try to reopen, and they lost that. It's still kind of ongoing, but in the briefs filed by the state Illinois EPA, they cited the villages testing repeatedly, extensively, more so than the U.S. EPA's testing. So it is useful to do that testing, and I do encourage that we do our own independent testing. Another thing I wanted to mention is why we're pushing so hard, on you, putting a lot of pressure. And there was a really good article about this whole topic in The Intercept. So this is international news now. I encourage everyone to read this article. And that article tackled specifically the race aspect of this that doesn't really apply here, that applies elsewhere. There are 109 census tracts in the National Air Toxics Assessment that was released. And out of those, only one is really getting any attention from the US EPA, and that was Willowbrook. And many of those census tracts are predominantly minorities, residents, and they're getting absolutely no attention. And we are starting to get attention now, but the reason Willowbrook got attention is because they have a lot of lawyers, doctors, celebrities even, and so the EPA knew even before this became public news that it would be a big deal. So they already gave them their attention. But not only that, it's not really, so the article talks a lot about race, which is a key important detail, but it's not so much, the effect is racial, but it's really about political power. And the reason that things have happened in Willowbrook is not just because they're doctors and lawyers and they're very well organized, but because they pushed really hard. And they pushed really hard, very quickly, and as hard as they could. They pushed their own local leaders, and their local leaders in turn pushed on the US EPA and the Illinois EPA. And that's why action has occurred, and that's why things are starting to move here as well. We've been pushing not just on you, we've been pushing on state representatives, state senators, we've been pushing on the federal representatives as much as we can. So that's why we push really hard. There's a whole other story, like I said in the Intercept article, about the racial impact and the fact that many of these census tracts don't have the representation to push. And it's a real tragedy that out of 109, one of them got attention and the others did not. But the other side of that story is that they got attention because they had the power to push and they had the power to make themselves heard. And so that's what we're doing here. We're trying to make ourselves heard, not just here, but at a higher level. We had Sam Yingling at our meeting yesterday, and he gave a good presentation and a talk on what he's doing in the state legislature, pushing bills on ETO. And I was happy to speak with Sam, and he shared with me that essentially his position is my position, which I was really glad to hear. And it boils down to this. He had a really good way of putting it, and he put it this way for everyone in the State House as well when he spoke on it. Essentially, we know that all amounts of ethylene oxide are dangerous. There's a saying in medicine that the dose makes the poison, but this is actually not true with mutagens. It's just a poison no matter the dose. And at lower doses, you may not be able to demonstrate actual harm. You may not see a medical condition caused by it, but it's still harming you. It essentially, you can kind of think of it as prematurely aging your body because it ultimately kills cells. So extra death of cells. And so he had a simple way of putting it once you realize that. He says, if you're not in favor of a total ban on ethylene oxide emissions, then your position is really, how much poison will we allow our citizens to be exposed to? And there's really no way around thinking about it that way, because all amounts are poison, and if there's any in the air, then people are breathing poison. And that's just a scientific fact, and Sam had a really simple way of putting it. And so that's how he's pursuing it at the state level, based on that kind of principle, that any amount you breathe is just a poison. And there's also another interesting aspect of that, is that some at the state level right now are not willing to go for a total ban, and they're proposing all sorts of very complicated regulatory schemes where the state would have the ability to inspect every 90 days or do a random test every 90 days. But that just, in my mind, that just amounts to recognizing that it's really dangerous, and it's so dangerous that we need to test all the time. And that just amounts to a tax on the people of the state so that these people can continue using it, and you can continue assuring that they're not using it outside the guidelines. And that just seems like a very expensive and complicated regulatory scheme just to maintain the use of this one chemical. So finally, I wanted to talk about we've had some disputes about whether the village has home rule authority to regulate in this area.
Horath, I'm going to correct the record if you're going to give us legal advice.
What's that?
I'm going to make a note for the record again if you're going to give us legal advice.
That's fine.
All right. Mr. Horath is a candidate for office. He has a legal degree, does not have a legal license. He's never practiced municipal law. He has never litigated a case involving municipal law.
Okay, so to continue, because I am just a citizen who hasn't practiced municipal law, and you like to state that for the record, I contacted professors at my school, and I asked them for the most expert professor on this topic, and they gave me a distinguished professor of environmental law who assured me that my interpretation of our home rule authority is correct, and he referred me to the Northwestern Law Environmental Advocacy Clinic, and they have now assured me that my interpretation is correct. And in fact, they have been pushing for regulation of a similar chemical in Chicago, manganese. Manganese is also regulated under the Clean Air Act and also has emissions limits under that act. I believe it's 0.3 micrograms per cubic meter. So the same exact position as ethylene oxide. And the city of Chicago, at the urging of the environmental clinic, passed an ordinance, I believe in June of 2018, that placed a ban on any new uses of manganese within the city limits. So no one who was not using manganese at that time is now allowed to start using it. And that's a regulation that is definitely more strict than the current state law. And in January of this year, they announced new regulations around how manganese is handled in the city. And there's now very strict ways that they can move it, transport it, and deal with it. Those are also more strict than state law in the area. And finally, the environmental clinic is now pushing the city to pass a total ban. And that would, of course, be much more stringent than state law in the area. So despite regulation there, so the city itself, of course, believes it has this power. And the environmental advocacy clinic also believes that the city has that power, and that power is just from home rule authority. But some people think that maybe Chicago has some special powers because Chicago also does get special things, but the city of Chicago does not have special power in that area. They just have home rule authority. The only real special power in that area is Cook County has home rule authority and is the only county to do so because it's granted in the Constitution. So I just wanted to state that for the record. And like I said, I hope we don't have to use that authority to pass any kind of legislation banning ourselves. It looks like things are moving forward at the state level, and I'm optimistic that there will be a satisfactory outcome to that based on talks with Sam Yingling and Belinda Bush and others. So, but I just wanted to state that for the record. So, thank you.
Hi, my name is Linda Conway. I'm a resident of Providence Oaks, right down the street here, right in the dark blue zone of where the ETO seems to be wanting to live. But it just seems that there's so much at stake with this. You know, we are a community of people, families that live here. In addition to that, we want to attract tourists. Think about places like Flint, Michigan, where they had the water issue. No one has Flint, Michigan, I don't think, or very few people have that on their bucket list of places they want to visit. With Six Flags and all the events and things that we have in the area, we want to keep residents here, raise our families. It's just too important. This independent air quality study is very important to get things moving for the EPA and the IEPA to take some action and support what the state government in Springfield is working on. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Amanda Lavitt-Wagner. I wasn't going to talk, but I am. I am a resident of Gurnee of only about 2.5 years. I live a mile away from Vantage, and we brought home our baby girl 8 months ago. And finding this out has been a toll on me and my husband. We do everything to protect our daughter, and to know that she could be breathing in these toxic gases kills me. I can't do anything to protect her with that, but you guys can. And I just urge that we get our independent testing. It's important for us, for our kids, for our grandchildren, and I know you all feel that same way. I just hope that we can speed up this process so I can sleep peacefully at night knowing that my baby girl is breathing in clean air.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Respected Mayor, honorable respected board members. My name is Asfaruddin. I'm the Imam at Islamic Foundation North, right here on Oak Plain Road. I'm also a Gurnee resident. I have enjoyed living here in Gurnee the past few years. My son enjoys going to the library. He has great experience with the police department, with the fire department. He enjoys going to his school. He loves his teachers. And I know all of you are investing many hours in our community, so I ask God Almighty to bless all of you and your families, and I know all of you have a lot on your plate, as you are not only concerned about the safety of our community, but you also have to oversee financial decisions as well. So for myself, what helps me make a difficult decision is I always try to go back to my vision, to my statement. And I went on the Gurnee website and I looked at, respected Mayor, I looked at your statement, and part of your vision, it says that we will invest in our children. So one question that I have, for all of us that we should ponder, can we say with 100% conviction that we are investing in our children if it's possible that the polluting company has influence over the testing results? That's one thing we should ponder over. Thank you for listening.
Hello, my name is Mildred Corder, and I'm from Wadsworth. And the reason I'm here is because I live 2.5 miles from Vantage and 5.5 miles from Medline. My family has, my children have all gone to the Gurnee school system. My daughter died of cancer. My son died of cancer, and my husband died of cancer. I've had cancer 3 times, and I wonder tomorrow if I'm going to have it again. So my concern is that with the schools that we have, and Wadsworth children go to the Gurnee schools, there are 6 schools within 3.5 miles of Gurnee and Vantage that is in Gurnee. I am asking you to do independent studies on Vantage now. We can't wait any longer. Each one of you live in Gurnee. You would think you would be interested in doing something to promote your own good health and be concerned that you take steps right now to do something, and immediate testing is necessary. Thank you.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I did not plan on speaking tonight, but I come here week after week, and I hear these very courteous people. They come up here and they tell facts. They don't make up fiction. And I've decided if independent testing is not done, it's immoral. It is an immoral decision not to have that testing done. There's just too many things you hear week after week, and I'm thinking, on a moral, if you put it on a moral value, it's immoral not to do the testing. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
I need your name, ma'am. I need your name on the tape, please.
Oh, I certainly will. Thank you.
No, I need it on the tape, please. Just say it quickly.
That's how bad the microphones are here.
I just need you to say it in the microphone. You didn't say your name at all.
I know, but I didn't hear you, and that was part of my point, because I come here week after week, and I can't even hear what you guys are conversing up there, and I don't know if I'm supposed to or not supposed to.
All I want you to do is state your name into the microphone, and it's the system we have. We're not going to get a new system before the next meeting.
Well, then maybe someone could speak up louder. I'm not asking for a new system, but I will state my name. My name is Barb Pulowski.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, I'm going to close the floor to public comment. Do I have a
Hello, my name is Sayed Karim. I'm a resident of Gurnee. I appreciate all the efforts that the village of Gurnee has made in terms of coming to a resolution. However, it's ironic and unfortunate that while we've debated and quibbled over the cost of a few $1,000s, we're considering multi-million-dollar adventures in the near future. What you will also notice is that there are many more people here today than there were last time. Every meeting there will be many, many more people until independent air testing is performed, until we deserve, we get what we deserve, and ultimately this is what democracy looks like. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Jim Sanchez, resident of Gurnee. I'll be quick. I just want to thank everybody that's been bringing all this stuff to our attention, people in the residents, and that it sounds like the state's getting on board, Waukegan's getting on board. Wonder what's taking so long here. I want to reiterate what everybody's saying. Please do the independent testing, please. It's beyond, it's taking too long. It needs to be done, and I know you know that. Independent testing, please.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Zara Kareem, and I have been living here my entire life, and I believe that clean air is a right for everybody. It's not a privilege, it's a right. I should be able to breathe clean, fresh air when I go outside. When I go outside, I should actually be breathing real, fresh air. I shouldn't be afraid to go outside or to play on my playground at school. What we need is independent air testing. That would make life so much easier. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Miriam. I live in this area, and I'm very concerned about the ETO issue. ETO is harming my family, my community, and my own environment. Why shouldn't we be able to say, I'm going outside to get some fresh air? Why should we be scared when we are going outdoors? And most importantly, why is nothing being done? To start, we need our own independent air testing. Therefore, we are sure of the data integrity, and the EPA will start to contribute to this issue. All we need to do is nudge them just a bit. Doesn't everybody deserve clean air? We deserve it, you deserve it, so please make it happen.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Tea Tanaka. I'm a resident of Grays Lake. My children go to school in Gurnee. I want to thank everybody who showed up today who's speaking about ethylene oxide issue that we have in our community. I also want to point out that the presentation earlier today for the sports complex, I don't think they have assessed, they have done a risk assessment of the air pollution that they're bringing the athletes to. So I just want to point that out for the record, that maybe that will be helpful to them for their risk assessment. Next, I want to thank the City of Waukegan for committing to doing testing, and I would hope that Gurnee would come on board and follow their lead too and join the City of Waukegan, get independent air testing done. We need to know what air we're breathing, what quality of air our children are breathing. We cannot move forward, we cannot have the EPA come here unless we know that. And it's within your powers. So I thank you for being in discussions with the City of Waukegan, and I'm hoping that you can actually join them fully and have the independent air testing done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Herb. My wife and I, we've lived in Gurnee for 25 years now. I live over at Westgate, and we brought up our kids, and what I want to say is I sympathize with everybody. I feel sorry for the community and what we're going through. It's sad that we have to deal with this. I wish I had a magic bullet to make it all go away so we could all move on. I have a vested interest, as my wife does. We have one of our kids, she works near Vantage, and we are concerned about it. But let's take the ETO problem and put it to a side for just a minute. Let's look at our great community. We have top-notch first responders. We have a municipality that works hard to make sure that our streets are clean when the snow hits and takes care of all our sanitation problems and whatever there is. We have a wonderful park district, accredited school system. We are a thriving community that has businesses that want to come in here. We have a great resource in the people who live in the community. We're all neighbors. We might not know everybody, but we all live here. So does the board. These are our friends, our neighbors, our elected officials who take care and govern our community. This mayor has worked and given her heart and soul to this community. Look up what she's done for this community. Look at this board and how hard they work. Now, I'm not saying that ETO isn't a problem. We have to deal with it. We have to correct the problems. But we also have to give them some type of credit and not pound on them constantly, day in and day out. Their hands are also tied. Look at the legislation, look at the transcripts. We can only move so fast. Unfortunately, we cannot move as fast enough as we want to. Like I said, I wish I had a magic bullet. But I think as a whole, this community, I support all of you. I want to see this problem go away just like everybody else. But give these people the opportunity. Is independent testing the right thing? I don't know. Maybe it is. But we do have to follow the rules and guidelines. Now, I know you people don't like hearing that, but it's the truth. We need to move on, but give these good people the opportunity to do their jobs and make this community greater. Thank you.
Thank you.
There you go. They clapped. Oh, they clapped. That was kind.
Thank you. My name's Diane Sarefka. Can you hear me? Great. I live in Gurnee on Sunrise. I've lived here for 31 years. Thank you very much for your comment about the board. They've done a lot for us, and the prior boards have as well. I agree with the point about having hands tied. But I will say that the people of Willowbrook had their independent testing, and they're done in 7 months. Action was taken with Sterigenics in 7 months. We were reported in the Chicago Tribune with Vantage and with Medline in November, December, January, February, March. 3 months at least. They were done in 7, and they did their independent testing. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to close the floor to public comment. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion by trustee trustee Ballmer, second by trustee Jacobs. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.